The Sporting Chance podcast is brought to you in part by Mountain State Falconry Supply.com. When you need falconry gear and you need it yesterday, go see our friend Heather McNeamer at Mountain State Falconry Supply.com.
And also, MidnightFalconry.com for the tightest braided equipment on the market.
And also, A Journey with Redtails.com. Check it out for the new book by author Bob Glass detailing his many years of experience hunting with red-tailed hawks.
And don't forget, our boy, Seth Roy at NorthMountainGoshawks.com. If you're in the market for a new hunting partner this coming season, reach out to Seth at his website or his Facebook page. And I would recommend strongly that you get on his list early because it gets filled up pretty quick.
And tell him Casey and Aaron sent you. All right, welcome everyone to the Sporting Chance podcast. I am Aaron Kincaid.
And I'm Casey Everett.
So the episode that's getting ready to air, we just kind of got right into it. We didn't even record an intro, so we wanted to come back around and do that to properly introduce the show. This week we are joined by Jake Messenger. Jake is a falconer up in the Northwest. He predominantly flies gyrfalcons on Sage Grouse. And in addition to that, he was a contestant on the reality series on the History Channel called Alone. The latest season 11. Is that right, Casey?
Yeah, season 11. Super epic. I've watched every single season, so I'm super into it. And I actually, before I even started watching season 11, somebody messaged me and they were like, "Oh, there's a falconer on this season." Like, "Oh my gosh." And I was like, "No way, there's a falconer on the season." And sure enough, he was on the season. I watched everything. No spoilers here. But I just reached out to him. I said, "Dude, would you like to come on our show?" And by some miracle, he said, "Yeah." He said, "Sure, I'd love to come on with you guys." And
I think he's a big fan.
He's a huge fan. Yeah, a long-time listener. And he had, I think he had, right, Aaron? I think he had fun.
I think he had a great time, yeah.
Yeah, we were asking him, listen, all the falconers out there and the people that are excited about Alone, thank you for joining us. But all the falconers out there and people that are fans of the show, we asked them all the questions that you wish you could ask one of those people. At least I feel. It was like 21 questions. It was like 31 questions on this episode. But it was great, man. It was great. It got me so pumped. I can't wait. I can't wait for it to drop, even though it's dropping right now. So stay tuned. But I can't wait to listen to it all over again. It was a great episode.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, enjoy.
All right, everyone. We're here with Jake Messenger. Is that how you pronounce it, Jake?
That's it.
And we're just super thrilled. Well, me personally, I'm super thrilled to have him here. I'm a huge fan of Alone. And the fact that there's a falconer that was on the most recent season is just like, it didn't quite fulfill all my fantasies, but it was close. And well, right, Jake? Like,
yeah.
You know what I'm saying, right? Like, I'm watching this show since forever, 11 years, and I'm going, just give me a red tail,
right?
And I don't even have to come home. I ain't coming home.
It's funny. Even the producers were saying we wish that you could trap a hawk out there. And I actually had peregrines, and I had a gyrfalcon out there.
Wow.
But it was the very tail end of the breeding season. And so all of the peregrines were getting ready to get out of there. And so they were only in my area for probably 2 weeks. They were just in kind of the late IS stage before they started heading south.
So yeah, because they drop you off like right before it starts getting like real cold.
Yeah. We got dropped off around September 1st.
Okay.
And where was this?
This was in the farthest most reaches of the Northwest Territories. So we were only about 90 miles from the Arctic Ocean and
geez.
120 miles or so inside the Arctic Circle.
Wow.
Are there polar bears there?
Yes, they've had polar bears in our range. It's not common for them to go that far inland, but because polar bears are kind of they're almost an aquatic mammal,
Yeah, oh yeah. They're like a mink.
Yeah, so they hang out really close to the ocean, out on the sea ice and on the shore during the summer. But yeah, they've had them wander through there. We did have a ton of grizzlies and a few black bears.
So you did see a lot of those while you were.
I saw them in the air before they dropped me off. I spotted a grizzly on the way to my area, and it was probably only maybe less than a mile from my area. And as far as spoilers go, one of the cast members killed a moose.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, it has a tendency to draw in every predator around. So I think that's one of the reasons why I didn't have much trouble with him, because he wasn't terribly far from me. And yeah.
I was going to ask, do you know how far everybody is around you?
He was probably about, as the crow flies, I'd say he was about 2 miles from me.
Well, so like, all right. Why can't, like, I have so many questions. Why can't you just be like, all right, I'm going to hike to you and we'll just team up and we'll pretend like we're doing our own thing, but we keep each other company and we'll split the money.
Sure. So,
you know what I mean?
So when we're dropped off, we have no idea where anybody is.
Oh, okay.
And that's, of course, by design.
So you learn that after the fact.
And then there's a buffer zone. Yeah, and there's a buffer zone between our areas. We carry around a satellite device that's, we call it our yellow brick. And it's a little handheld device that they monitor, actually, from base camp. And so if we get past our border, they'll send us a message that says, hey, turn around and get the hell out of there. And that happened to me on the first day out there. Yeah, because I wanted to go out and explore my area and test what the borders were so I could get a good idea of what I had in my area. And I wasn't actually trying to go past my area. I thought I was still in it, but I found this perfect place for a permanent camp. And I spent about a half an hour or more setting up in there. And I got a message that I was out. And so I had to hike all the way back to my drop point. And that was kind of a pain. And I actually, in that hike back, I lost a couple items of my gear because I had a tripod stuck in the side pocket of my backpack, and going through the alders, it ripped open that zipper, and I lost the GoPro and tripod and my fishing line that was in that pocket.
Yeah,
so I lost my fishing line before I could even use it.
Oh my God. How long did you look for it? I mean, you had to be.
It was a couple of days, 2 or 3 days. And then I was keeping my eyes open for it the whole time, but never found it. It was just a little black spool that disappeared into the alders and mud, so.
Like the odds of finding that are so slim.
So slim. Because, I mean, you have no idea where you've even been, and so, especially on day one, you're kind of disoriented. But But I made do with it, made a hand line out of paracord core, and that worked out really well. Caught about 10 fish with that. And I made a net as well. And so I was still able to fish. The thing probably worked out better than the fishing line would have anyway.
Oh, yeah. You lucked out. Yeah, paracord's so useful to have.
It is. Yeah.
So now question for you. I have to ask because I've thought this a million times watching the show. When you're making a gill net, is it the same method that you would use to make a mist net or a net?
That's exactly why I was able to make it, because I had made some dogazas before, and so I just used the same method, except I used a different pattern where with the a dogaza, you're using kind of a square pattern. And a gill net, you want a diamond pattern, which is really easy to tie. It's the exact same concept, but the knots that are on the sides in that diamond shape, you want the knots to help get caught in the gills.
Right.
So the fish's head goes through them and it, because of that diamond shape, they can squeeze through it, but they can't pull back out.
Yeah, the gills get stuck, and then the dorsal fin would hopefully get stuck on the top.
Yeah, exactly. And with a square net, it wouldn't work that way. You want that diamond shape. But it was really easy to tie. I just used overhand knots to do it, and it took me about 3 days, and I made a giant net, and it looked pretty good. So
that's the show. Yeah, I was every time you would pop up, because that's the thing is annoying because there's so many contestants that
especially early on.
Yeah, I'm looking for you the whole time.
Yeah,
what is he doing? What's he up to?
Right. So there's a lot of stuff that didn't get put in. For one, I was competing with a moose kill, and Timber killed that moose on, I think, day 14. And it doesn't take many episodes to get to day 14.
Right.
And then it's like, there's all kinds of action going on because you got bears coming in, you've got meat that's being processed, and just the spectacle of that accomplishment.
Yeah.
And so, I didn't get a tremendous amount of airtime, but I think it was episode 6 is how far I made it on the season.
But in the grand scheme of things, I mean, you made it a long time. You did 42 days, 43?
No, it was about half that, actually, because I ended up being medically extracted because I had a bowel obstruction. And the reason that happened is during that time when I was making my net and making my fishing line and just kind of getting everything ready, I had plenty of body fat. I gained some weight to go out there. And I just wasn't too worried about eating, but what I was eating was what I could forage. And that late in the year, what you forage is kind of rough. It's mature plants and it's hard to digest. And it ended up causing some complications with me. And especially because after I did start catching fish, it was like day 8 or so, 8 or 10, something like that, where I really started to haul in a lot of fish. I ate a lot of food, and I had that bowel obstruction, and it was like 14 days. I didn't have bowel movement. So.
I couldn't believe that. And like, I have a lot of questions about that, and you don't have to answer them, but like, did they just give you like a laxative at the hospital, or did they have to get in there? Because my mom so let me just set this up. My mom was a hospice nurse for like 30 years, and she would tell us stories of having to physically help extract feces from like elderly people that are on weird diets and their medications. Yeah. So I don't know if you don't have to answer any of this.
I'll answer
I just kind of wanted to know.
I'll answer it. It's no problem. So the obstruction was so far up in my intestines that I don't know if I could have taken care of it out there. I was working on a bushcraft enema to try and help things out.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But I tried a few things to try and get that moving in there. And ultimately what happened when they extracted me, I went to the hospital, the village hospital in Inuvik, and they didn't have like the closest, and this is the reason why they extracted me when they did. It was already to a really risky point because I'd had a fever the night before they extracted me. But it broke in the night. So I thought, okay, I've got a little bit of time. And I kind of went back and forth in my head about whether or not I'd even tell the doc about it.
Right.
Because I still wanted to push it as far as I could,
Yeah.
But
you never know. Other people could tap out. You could be the last one.
Yeah, exactly. But because I had a fever, I thought, well, it's pretty close. And if I don't get it, and I do contract sepsis, that's death because we were about 30 hours from Edmonton.
Okay.
And there were fires that had happened. It was slowing down the airport and everything. So I asked them for 4 more days to be able to try and work it out. And they said, no, we got to get you out of here right now because you're that close. And so I go to the hospital, spend a couple of days there, and they went at me from both ends. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
So I didn't have to have surgery, luckily, because that for an obstruction, that's a possibility. But the medications that they gave me, it was able to loosen things up and get me moving.
Okay.
But it was kind of a wild ride.
It sounds like
I bet you felt like $1 million after that.
Oh, geez. I felt like I'd been hit by a train.
Oh, my gosh. Man,
but,
dude, behind the scenes. Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, I was wondering how that worked out.
And then they kept me for another 7 days in base camp to go through my recovery. I had a little Arctic refugee pod that they stuck me in. And
okay. So how does it work with the show? So like I'm assuming they handle, all the medical bills, all the transport to get you out there.
Yep.
Now, another question that you don't have to answer, but I've always wondered it. Are you just putting your life on hold to go on the show, or do they give you some sort of compensation?
They do compensate you, but I'm not allowed to talk about how much or anything like that. But they do make it so that you can step away from your life and things keep rolling at home. So that was good.
That's great. Yeah, that makes it better.
I thought I'd be the guy at the end, but didn't make it nearly as far as I thought I would. But
it sounds like you were set up to last. Like if it weren't for that, you would have done really well.
I would have lasted a lot longer than I did. That's for sure. Yeah.
Now, Aaron, do you have any questions, or I'll just go all night.
Yeah, it's I watched the first season of the show, and I'm gonna have to watch your season now.
Yeah, the first season up through season 11, it changes quite a bit. So
I remember there were people who tapped out the first night because they lost their fire starter immediately.
Right. I remember that.
I didn't even take one.
Oh, okay. That was probably
a bow. You did a bow.
I took a bow. I took a bow and an axe, a saw, fishing line and hooks, 2-quart pot, sleeping bag, paracord, snare wire for trapping, and other tasks. What have I left out?
Other tasks. I think I just got that. That's what I would do, man. I'd fold that thing over, make it nice and smooth, so there's no points, and I would friggin' I'm a plumber. I'm a plumber, so I'd shove that thing out. I'd snake that drain.
There's stuff that you can make a snake out of that'd be a lot easier on you.
Man.
But I took a multi-tool.
Okay.
A multi-tool, and I know I'm missing something, but that's about it.
What was the scariest thing that happened to you? Sorry, Casey.
Great question. No, great question. Go ahead.
The scariest thing that happened to me was definitely that
aside from your brush with death.
Aside from the brush with death, losing the fishing line was, I wouldn't say it was a panic mode, but it was like an oh shit mode. Like, what did I just do? And here you go. Scariest thing I thought that I might get extracted for was the burn that I got on my hand.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, because when that happened, that was what had happened. Was I left a leather glove up at my camp, and I was down on the shore of the river, and I had started to get sore between my legs because it was all very humid up there. You're like in the Everglades of the Arctic. Right. And so because of how humid it is all the time, hygiene, you got to really keep up on it. And I noticed that I was starting to get a little chafing between my legs just from all the walking I was doing. And I didn't want that to develop into an infection. So I boiled some water to dunk my underwear in just to sterilize it, make sure that everything's as clean as it can be. And when I took, because I'd left my glove up at my camp, I made a big ball of grasses to use as kind of a pot holder to pull it off of the fire. And when I did that, the handle, I didn't realize that when I grabbed it, the handle had been heated up too. Normally it would be no problem, but while I was talking to the camera and stuff, there were flames that must have been licking that handle. And so when I grabbed onto the handle with that bundle of grass, it just scorched all the way through the grass and kind of melted my fingers on my right hand. Oh. And I tried to steady it with my left hand as I was setting it down, and it spilled over the boiling water. It was like a rolling boil.
Oh.
It spilled onto my left hand and just melted the skin off of it.
Jeez.
And so that was a moment where, I knew I could take care of it out there, but anytime we have an injury or something like that, it's pretty sketchy. You don't have any antibiotics out there with you. You've got nothing other than a small first aid kit. And so I just treated it out there as best I could. And when they came in to do the med checks, by that time it had healed, and I was able to take the bandage off of it and use my hand normally by then. But
Good.
that was something that I really had to keep tabs on. I had wolves in my camp. I had wolverines on the shore of the river. I never had to tangle with any grizzly bears or anything like that, which I thought from day one that was going to be a big problem because it's one of the highest concentrations of grizzly bears on the continent. But I live in grizzly country, and I've been dealing with them my whole life. In fact, this year, I had my camp torn up this summer by a bear here while I was in it. And
really, how'd that
Yep.
play out?
Oh, it played out just fine. But I had a girl with me. She wanted to come out and experience some bushcraft stuff, and it was like 3:00 in the morning, and this bear came through our camp and tore everything up. And I didn't want to wake her up, but it woke her up, and I just told her to be really quiet, and he eventually moved off, but didn't bother us. So,
where you live, are you allowed to be armed?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Do you mind sharing where you live?
What? Oh, East Idaho. I'm right on the border of Yellowstone.
Oh, cool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So going back to the scary conditions in camp, I never was scared. It was,
and that's just because you feel like because you're accustomed to the big predators being around.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Are Wolverines scary at all? I imagine they have a crazy reputation.
Yeah,
but I'd imagine that has anyone ever actually been hurt by a Wolverine?
Oh, I'm sure they have. They're like little pit bulls, and they're not afraid of anything. But like other predators, they really don't like to be around people. And but they wouldn't be afraid of you at all. So it's one of those situations, I think, where if you were to be aggressive towards one, or to be in the wrong place at the wrong time or something, then you could have a tangle on your hands. But like Jordan Jonas, he had a Wolverine that was a real problem, and it kept getting into his moose meat. So he had killed a bull moose out there, and he ended up killing that thing with his axe. And
wow.
So it was
that was on the show, right?
Pretty badass moment. Yep.
So now how does that work? Are you okay? I hunt, right? I'm a bow hunter. I do all kinds of hunting. Do you have to apply for tags to go on the show, or does the show provide you with tags for the things you can kill?
That's exactly what it is. The show provides you with tags. You have a quota of each species that you can kill. Some have an unlimited amount, like squirrels, for instance, rabbits. But then there are others like beaver. We were only allowed to kill one beaver. And so that all comes back to agreements that they make with the tribes, because most of the time this takes place on tribal land. And so the negotiations that they do for the amount of game that you can take is with the tribe.
Has there ever been a situation where, because I'm thinking you're basically on the show, you're going back in time and you're living kind of how frontiersmen would live, and
it's beyond that.
It's past that, because they had probably a little bit more resources at their disposal. But
it's closer to Stone Age.
If someone was out hunting moose out there and they came across you and they gave you food, would you be disqualified?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not supposed to interact with any people that you would encounter. Like if a hunting party was to come across you or something, which is very, very rare, then you're just told to not interact with them, don't talk to them, and to notify. We have a satellite phone, and so we can notify production and let them know that there are people in the area. And then in that case, I'm not sure what would happen, but they would probably intervene and just say, hey, we've got this guy here, and don't talk to him.
Would they show up and be like, what'd they give you? And question you, you think?
They might. I don't know. Because
what resources have you acquired? They give you a hunting rifle. You're just you're set for the rest of the show.
Right. It's nothing like that I think has ever happened. So it's like everything else that they would have, it would be a case by case thing, I think.
Now,
But
are they searching all your gear for like GPS transponders and stuff to make sure that you're?
They search everything. I mean, they're not just searching for things like that. They're searching for needles or contraband, food, minerals that you could use as a supplement. They go through all of your stuff, like with their fingers, like feeling if you took a sweater, like they would feel through the sweater and make sure that you're not hiding dental floss in there or, something.
Wow.
Yeah.
A lot of integrity to that show.
It's just really awesome, the lengths that they go through to make sure that everything is fair and that it's real. That's the thing I think that people have a hard time wrapping their head around, is how absolutely real this show is. It is the most real reality show on TV.
Yeah. I even got in that conversation like when me and my wife first started watching it years ago, and she's like, "Come on, this has got to be like." But then like as she says it in the beginning of the show, and then at the end of the show is the season with that one woman where they took her out for like medical because she was like literally like starving to death, and she filmed her back and you could see her ribs and her spine.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's fake. You think she's doing that for entertainment? Right. Like she's literally starving to death. Like they took her out. She could barely walk, like it's.
They'll let you push it right to the limit of recovery.
Yeah. That's fascinating, man. I love the show, and I just fantasize about just maybe not trying to compete in the show because I'd probably lose. I'm like, I love my family. I couldn't be away, like I got a whole bunch of stuff like I think I could do it, but like I know I would get out there. I'd be out there for like a week.
Every man thinks they could do it.
Yeah, I'd be out there for a week, and then I'd be like, all right, I'm done.
I totally win.
Right. Well, I was right there too. I've watched the show for years since it first came on.
You've actually got a leg to stand on with your claim to say you could win. You're talking about the net, and I'm like, man, I can't even tie a knot.
Yeah, that's awesome that you pulled that out. And okay, so now we have to ask, like, what's the process to get on the show? Like, if I said I want to go on the show tomorrow, like, it's not going to happen, right? I have to do all kinds of stuff, right? So what do you have to do to get on the show?
There are a lot of hoops that you have to jump through. I'll just tell you my process, how it went. They open up an application period every year, and they'll send out a casting call. And if you follow the Alone groups on Facebook or other social media, or even I think History might even put a little blip out about it when casting is open. And this is now it won't be on the History channel, but just like on their webpage or whatever. And it'll just say casting is now open for Alone season 12 or 13 or whatever you're on. And then you can go to the production company's webpage and fill out an application. And that application is just a general list of questions about yourself, your history, your hobbies, your family, pretty much like a summary of your whole life. And then you write a little biography of yourself and throw in a few pictures and send it in. And I was for years wanting to go on the show, but I didn't ever apply for it. And there are about 100,000 people a year that apply.
Wow.
So it's really,
I bet a lot of those are just complete BS though. Applications.
Guys like me, like filming myself, like lighting a fire, like, look at this, I can build a fire.
I shot a deer one time.
I took a frontal shot of a deer last year, and I found it.
You can imagine how many emails they have to weed through, right?
Yeah.
And they do. They go through them all. And they've got a whole team of people working on this. Well, my kids were small when I first started thinking about going on. And about 5 years or 6 years passed where I was watching them get older and older and older. And I finally thought to myself, they're old enough now. I think I could slip away for a bit. And it wasn't a casting call. That's the thing. It was off season. It was between seasons. And I'm sitting there at my computer and I just thought, I think I can just pull this off right now. I'll just send it in off season and see what happens. And so I filled it out, sent it in, put a little, just a very honest summary of myself. And that's the thing that they're looking for is authenticity. Like they don't look for people that are blowing themselves up, trying to make themselves look like the best thing in the world. Like they want to see authenticity. And I filled it out and sent it in and just was like, okay, if it's meant to be, then it'll happen, even though it's not a casting call. Right. And I sent it in June. The casting call had been in February. So I was like right between seasons. And after I sent it in, I just kind of sat back and waited. And in February, it was February 26th, I get an email from the production company saying, hey, we've been waiting 6 months to talk to you.
Wow.
And,
Jeez.
And so that was the first foot in the door. After that, I had several interviews. I had a Zoom meeting interview. I took one of my falcons to that. It was in March in Idaho. So it was like in the middle of a blizzard. I took my phone and put it on a tripod down in the river bottoms, 3 feet of snow, winds blowing, ice hanging from my beard. I got a gyrfalcon on my fist. And it went really well. During the interview, I had a cow moose and a calf walk behind me. So It was like memorable stuff, that stood out. And that's the thing is like, if you're going to apply for this, you do want to make yourself stand out, but you want to make it stand out in a way that's like about you and real, not something that's fabricated, because they can see right through it. They do this all day, every day.
They see it. 100,000 applicants. They've seen it all. I would imagine.
Exactly. So I made it through that Zoom meeting, and then I had to submit a bunch of videos to them, about 10 hours or 15 hours of footage of me just doing my stuff. And I got a phone call that said I was invited to boot camp, which is 20 people. And from that 20 people at boot camp, they watch you in real time display your skills, demonstrate your skills, how you speak, how you look on camera, and interact with everybody. And they really get to see your personality, and that's a week long. And then after that's over, they say, okay, we'll let you know. And then you're waiting again. There is so much waiting in this process.
Wow. Jeez.
And the whole process took about it was over a year for me from the time I sent in my application till I got that magic phone call that said, Jake, welcome to season 11 of Alone, and that was
my gosh. Yeah. Wow.
So pretty exciting
incredible.
moment. Yeah, it was surreal.
It's gotta be. So when they give you that call, do they tell you where you're going so you can do research, or do they wait for like the last minute, like to kind of keep that from happening?
It feels like the last minute, but they give you I'd say it was about 3 weeks.
Okay.
To get the gear that you need and prepare, because you have to select your own clothing that you take with us. It's you're dialing in your gear. Like your gear is the most important thing to you out there, because that's all you're going to have the whole time.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that your 10 items are in order, that you selected the right clothing to take with you, which are not part of the list, but they do give you a list of things that you can take, like how many pairs of socks you can take, underwear, pants, all of that stuff. So you have to be really careful about what you take depending on the region and the area. And
because like that's another thing is I wondered like how big like is the bag you're allowed to bring? Like how do you fit all your cold weather gear in there?
Yeah, they supply the backpack for you. So it does, because of how small your list is anyway, everything fits. It's popping at the seams, but it fits.
Okay. Now, are you okay? So are you reaching out to companies telling them that you're going on the show would they be interested in supplying gear, or you're just doing your own independent research and just picking what you're praying is going to work? That's not going to rip or something.
It's all on you. And in fact, you sign an NDA, nobody can know that you're going. And
right, I would imagine. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
So like even your family members, you limit who you tell. Like you look at your family and you say, okay, who's going to keep the secret?
Right. Got it.
So I only told like 4 people.
Was anybody mad at you? Like, where the hell have you been?
No, not at all. I'm such a loner anyway that nobody even really noticed I was gone.
Typical falconer. Typical. Yep. There you go. Do you think the falconry played a key in them selecting you? Like, I feel like that's had to be something super interesting with like, wow, look at this guy. Jeez.
Yeah, for sure. They like seeing something new, something different that hasn't been done before. And so, the videos of me doing falconry, and I had some abatement videos that I submitted with my stuff, and me handling my falcon during interviews, and at boot camp, I had a hawk on my fist. I mean, it was
cool.
I played it up because I knew that was the thing that was going to set me apart. Because you want them to say, "Oh, you're Falcon guy," right?
Yes.
The thing that sticks in their head. So during all of my videos that I submitted, I wore the same shirt every time. It was a red plaid shirt. And so I kind of had that lumberjack look going, and I just wanted to make myself
very smart.
Yeah, I just wanted to be identifiable,
That was good. You don't have to get like an agent for any of this kind of stuff. You just it's all on you.
Yep, it's all on you.
Okay.
Jake, I wanted to ask you, what kind of doors has this opened up other than being on the Sporting Chance podcast? What other doors has this opened up for you?
I've had a number of opportunities that have kind of presented themselves, but I'm still contracted with History. So for a little while, I can't do any other shows or anything like that yet. But who knows what's going to happen in the future? Even the Alone show has even been known to do redemption seasons. And so
I was curious about that.
Yeah, I've got my fingers crossed because I would go back in a heartbeat.
Pack some castor oil if you go back.
I've got a few plans. If that raises its ugly head again.
One time I got really, obviously not as bad as you, but I got seriously constipated. I had this like crazy ear infection, head cold, turned into pink eye. I was on steroids, antibiotics, all types of stuff. And I got super constipated from all the medication I was on. And castor oil. I had to drink castor oil. Have you ever had to drink that?
Yeah, it's nasty.
Oh, dude. Casey, have you ever had it?
No. Castor oil, is that from a beaver, I'm assuming? I don't know.
I don't know. That's a good question. I really don't know where it's from.
It sounds like it's from a beaver. It says.
Sure doesn't smell like a beaver's castor, though.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm looking what...
Is that what they give you before you go for a colonoscopy?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I just remember my dad in the bathroom.
It's made from plant seeds.
Yeah, sure. It was your dad. Right.
No, it was. I'm not that. I look like I'm 50, but I'm only 30. I got a couple more years, and then I'm gonna have to go right in there and get it in there. Yeah, I just remember my dad was just like in agony for like the whole night, and then he went in the next day for his thing. My wife is a nurse also, and she actually worked in endoscopy. That was her. She loved working there. So
they probably don't give him castor oil. It's probably something more like what I had. That it's like Roto-Rooter.
Yeah. Yeah. For your bowels.
Yeah. Drano.
I had to do like the full like squatty potty pose too to make it all happen. We aren't meant to like sit in a chair-shaped toilet to take a dump.
Yeah. Right.
Casey's a plumber, so this has to hit really close to home for him.
Yeah. I see squatty potties in everyone's bathroom.
Do you really?
Yeah, and then I just like I can't help just picture like the old lady that I'm like working in her house, like just picturing the old lady on that thing. I'm like, oh my god! And I just slide it.
That's your
slide it
problem,
out of the
you
way.
pervert.
I just like, you can't help it. Like, you see the porta potty, you see the old lady, you're like, oh, all right, I'm gonna slide this thing out of the way and fix this sucker. It's just, oh man.
I've
ahead,
got
Aaron.
one more question personally about your experience on the show, and I'm not sure if Casey has any more. But I wanted to ask simply, did you have an idea of like the region you were going to?
Well,
like, to prepare yourself.
They gave us kind of a clue during boot camp of the description of the area.
Okay.
And what was featured in the area. And from that, I was actually able to dial it into within 50 miles.
Wow.
But
Jeez.
I don't know if anybody else did that. But I've been around the continent a lot, especially up in the Arctic. And so when they started talking about some of the things that were going to be featured there, like they said it was going to be in a delta. And I said, well, there's only one big delta up there. So as soon as they said the word delta, I kind of knew the general area that I'd be going.
Have they done a season in like somewhere tropical, somewhere?
No, the closest
oceanic?
would probably be, they did one in Patagonia, and it was kind of far north in Patagonia. So it wasn't like clear down in Tierra del Fuego, but that I wouldn't call that tropical by any means, but that was a milder climate. And they did Vancouver Island a couple of years, and Vancouver Island is, that's coastal rainforest. So
right.
that probably would have been the closest.
I could imagine dropping people on desert islands or something, like a series of desert islands in an area, or in the rainforest in the Amazon or something like that.
Yeah, they haven't done anything truly tropical or warm weather yet, but who knows? They might do something in the future. Who knows?
I don't know what would be worse, the rainforest or the Arctic.
Oh, I would love the Arctic every time, but the rainforest, the thing about Vancouver Island or any of those other coastal islands, if you've got salt water, you've got food, like tons of food. So I think that something like Vancouver Island would be pretty nice.
Right.
Compared to where I was. I mean, there was a lot of food in my area, but the conditions are super harsh.
Yeah, it's brutal up there.
Brutal.
What was the low while you were there? I know I said I had one question, but
that's right on lines with my last question about Alone, and then we'll switch gears. But I had two last questions. But yeah, that was part of it. Was like, what was the roughest part?
So as far as the temperatures go, well, the roughest part was that it was really rainy. So it rained almost every day that I was out there.
Jeez.
You're right at the end of the season, and it's cold rain. I mean, you're hovering right above freezing. And every night it was freezing. Like you get up in the morning and there's ice everywhere, just because of the rain from the day, and then freezing at night. And so when they extracted me, winter was just starting to set in. We were getting our very first snowfalls. So I didn't experience the super cold weather that some of the other guys did. But it was still pretty cold. The coldest that they experienced, I think, was probably somewhere around 0, maybe a little below 0. But actually, I think it was maybe even 10 below 0 or something that they experienced. But it gets as cold as like 40 or 50 below 0 up there.
Jeez. That's but like, so the rain was the hardest part, but not being like by yourself, like, because everyone always says the mental game is the hardest part.
The mental game is the hardest part, and that's what people need to realize about survival or surviving alone, is that it doesn't take long, maybe a week or less. Some people experience it on day one, and you
like
saw that
like that kid that faked the injury on that one season. You remember that? It was like he was like the YouTuber, and he like finagled his way into the show, and like the first night he's like, "Oh, I hurt my foot," and it was like, and he wouldn't show like what happened, and he's like, "Oh, I'm cold, I gotta go to the hospital." It was so fake. It was so obvious it was fake.
You have to kind of speculate, but because I wasn't there, I don't know what happened. But there are I'm sure there are times when people like make things happen.
Aaron, I'm dead serious. It was like, I know bad acting when I see it. Like, it was bad acting. Like, he was like, my leg, oh my God, I gotta go to the hospital. And he calls him and he was like crying, like on the first night. Like, I think he just had a little bit of a.
Well, there's something that people experience out there called drop shock. And that's when you get dropped off in the middle of nowhere and you're completely disoriented. And then that's like when everything sets in, they realize they're completely out of their element. And not only that, they're completely alone. They don't have anything to distract themselves. We're so used to picking up our phones and distracting ourselves. Anytime something bad in our life happens, we can get instant entertainment. And that dopamine hit happens. And you can work through it. But in a situation like that, you have no external source of any kind of endorphin. Like you have to be able to be comfortable with yourself. And if you have demons in your closet, like things that are going on back home, you had a fight with somebody, or there's something having to do with work that's eating on you or whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. If it exists in your life and it's negative, it comes out really quickly out there, because all you have is your thoughts. You are completely independent when it comes to thought out there. There's no agenda. There's no social media stimulation. There's no, nobody's telling you good job. Nobody's telling you anything. Nobody's telling you they love you. Nothing. And so that
nobody does
really,
that for us anyway.
Yeah. Well, even something like, we're falconers, so we probably all three of us have dogs, right?
Oh yeah.
We're houndsmen.
Yeah. Right. So you don't have your dog. You don't have anything that gives you any source of attention or affection.
Yeah.
And
that's rough. That's got to be rough.
That's when you really realize how important that stuff is in life. Because we are a herd animal. And even loners like falconers have people in their life. Even if they're a hermit, there's somebody, Yeah. So yeah, that sets in for a lot of people, and it only takes a matter of days before they're ready to hit the button. And
I believe it. I'm laughing, making jokes, but I go to a falconer meet for a weekend, and I'm at the end of it, I'm like dying to get home to see my kids and my wife. Like,
yeah, sure.
I'd be done. I'd be having conversations with myself like within 24 hours. I'd be done. Be crying.
You'd make like little bud in your family.
Right.
I start feeding them like fake food and stuff. It'd be terrible. So now this is my last question about Alone. Unless Aaron has anything else, or Jake, you have anything else you want to add. But I want to know, if you had to pick, this is a great question. I love this question. If you had to pick one bird to bring with you, what would it be, and how long, based off of the game numbers there, how long do you think you would last? Without obviously any medical complications.
Birds trained, right?
Birds trained, ready to go right out the box. You get one scale, you get one scale, no batteries. You get an old school scale with weights, or you have to do it off the keel.
I love this question because I've never been asked this.
Perfect.
Okay. I'm a long winger. I've been a long winger my whole life, but the answer is a goshawk.
Oh, that's the answer we were looking for. That's the answer that our audience did not want to hear, but we wanted to hear.
Yeah.
It's not a Harris hawk.
Not a Harris hawk?
No, not a Harris hawk. Couldn't take the weather up there.
Tell us more.
It'd be sitting there in your shelter saying, "Are you freaking kidding me, man?"
You can eat the Harris hawk.
Yeah, the Harris hawk. Yeah.
Right. The thing about a goshawk, it's perfect for that region because you're encountering snowshoe hares, grouse, and the grouse up there, they're not like our grouse here, right? I think that you could actually, flying from the fist, I think you'd have a pretty good chance of getting one, because they're really docile. Like you can get within 10 feet of them, no problem, and they're just sitting there looking at you like you're a cow,
right?
And so snowshoe hare, squirrels, grouse, those would be the three species that that you'd be hunting up there with a goshawk, but I think you could survive a long time because you'd be able to feed yourself and the bird.
Okay. Now, what subspecies of goshawk would you bring? Well, that you have to ask that question because are you bringing a tiercel? You're not bringing a tiercel. You're going to bring a female.
No, I'd take a female, but I think I'd take a North American.
Okay, ballsy. Yep. I love it. I love it for the region you're in, but I'd probably stick with a big fin, to be honest.
Yeah. The thing about it is that you're in forest up there. Oh, there is open tundra, but that's not where the game is. The game's going to be up close. You're going to be within feet of it, and you're in timber, whether it's alders or birch trees, poplars. I think because of its agility and because of its the proximity to the game that you're going to be hunting, you're not going to be needing really long flights at all. I think I would go with a North American.
Okay. Listen, I never caught more game in my entire life than when I flew this first North American I flew last season.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, they'll catch anything, anywhere, any situation. They just squeeze right through and grab it.
Yeah.
And that's what you need. Wow, that's a great answer. But now that was our transition question to your history in falconry. Can you talk us through that? How'd you get into it?
Yeah. So I'm 43. I'm going to be 44 in about a week. And I started studying falconry when I was about 8. My sponsor was Kent Christopher. I don't know if you guys have been around long enough to know who that even was.
Sounds familiar.
Kent, right, Aaron? Kent was part of the old guard. He was a fantastic falconer and accomplished things, especially with gyrfalcons, imprinted gyrfalcons that very few people had ever done. And specifically gyrfalcons on sage grouse. And he lived here in East Idaho. I met him when I was 8 years old on my 8th birthday. And from that time on, he couldn't get rid of me.
Oh, that's good.
And so back then in the 90s, now when I met him was in the 80s, but in the 90s, the earliest age that you could get licensed as a falconer was 14. Okay. So on my 14th birthday, I took the test, and it's been fun ever since. There was a 2-year period of time where I had to stop my apprenticeship to go and do something for my church for a couple of years. Okay. My church at the time, and so I actually ended up having to do 4 years of apprenticeship. They wanted me to keep going because I had taken that break. Okay. So since my early 20s, about 21 years old, I have been a falconer constantly.
Awesome.
Mostly, except for my apprenticeship, my whole falconry career has been with long wings. I started doing
red tails, as most apprentices do.
I flew. My first was a kestrel, and then I thought it was fun and they're cute, but I wanted to be able to hunt stuff through the winter that I could actually eat.
Right.
And so sparrows and starlings just wasn't doing it for me,
Right. Yeah.
So I trapped a red tail and caught a lot of game with that bird. Trapped another red tail, and then as soon as I had my general permit, I've been flying long wings ever since. So I've flown them all. As far as passage birds, imprints, I'm comfortable with both. Most guys will specialize with just one, either one or the other, either IS chamber raised birds or passage birds or whatever. But I appreciate both IS and passage birds for their different traits. But I think that, like, if I was only going to fly one bird for the rest of my life, it would probably be a passage long wing.
Okay. Yeah. Can you just give us quick for the uninitiated, the pros and cons of, just real quick, of flying an imprint long wing, which is like kind of like, right? It's kind of, I'm not a long winger, not yet, but it's kind of like a taboo thing to fly an imprint long wing.
Yeah.
And then obviously passages, they come pretty much out of the box, ready to go, ready to kill stuff.
Right.
So what would be the pros and cons of both?
So the pros, now specifically with imprints, the only long wing that I imprint is gyrs. And the reason is because of how they develop when imprinted if you do it right. And it's more of a long development with that bird, like over a couple of years, where if I was to go out and trap a passage gyr, for instance, you know, you've got a bird that's mentally developed from the time you trap it. An imprint bird, that mental development, you go through all of its stages of development with it looking at you as though you're another falcon. Like, you know, they never think that you're another bird, or they never think that they're a person. They think that you're a bird, right? Or something like it. It's something mental in there where they see you as something that's kinship.
Okay.
And so I guess the way I could sum this up the best is that whether or not you have a passage bird that you intermew or an imprint bird, you end up with pretty much the same bird after about 5 years. Okay. Because the passage bird will, they'll adopt a lot of the traits of an imprint. The longer you have them, the longer you have that relationship with them, especially if you're using them a lot over years, they can really become bonded to you. Right. But an imprint, you've got that from day one. And if you don't screw it up and make a nightmare out of a bird,
right,
you've got a really great hunting companion, and that has good manners, that hoods well, that does all of the things that you want it to do. There's only one thing that is a longer development with an imprint bird, and that is or an imprint gyr specifically. Okay. And that is their physical ability, because it takes longer for them, because they're not living out there in the wild. You have to fly them a lot. You have to kill a lot of game to get their footing and their wariness of other birds and all of those things, you know, because they can act kind of stupid like a puppy all the time. So the more exposure that they have to what you're doing out there, the faster they'll fall into the category of a good game hog. But yeah, I've seen things from imprint birds that would just knock your socks off.
Okay.
But I don't know.
Your primary quarry out there?
Sage grouse has been, but here in Idaho, over the last few years, they've really limited what you can do with sage grouse. We can only take 2 a year now.
Jeez, man.
Yeah, it's pretty bad, pretty dire. It really messed up the game. But
do you feel like that's warranted, the low take? Do you feel like they're in trouble?
They are in trouble. The reason they're in trouble is because of habitat loss.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing with most game species, most wildlife, is that, in my opinion, and I'm sure there's exceptions to the rule, that enemy numero uno is habitat loss. It's not hunters, it's not collectors.
Right. Yeah. But the thing about that too, and this is my own personal view on it, is that it does reach a point because of habitat loss that you do have to dial it back. And, you know, and especially, and I'm not pointing fingers at falconers or any other hunter or anything like that, but the more harassment that you give these wintering flocks of birds, it's in my mind, it's got to have some kind of an impact.
I'm sure it does.
You know, midwinter, when everything's at its hardest, now they're at their healthiest, right?
Yeah.
But if you're out there, you know, trying to get every ounce of flight time that you can get, and as many flights as you can, and there's 20 guys buzzing around out in the sagebrush, you know, pushing these birds, I can understand in a situation like what we're in, where the conservationists look at it and they say, okay, we gotta change something here because everybody's kind of got to pay for it.
Right.
And gun hunters aren't going to be happy if they can only take 2 and you could take more. So,
yeah, but gun hunters are also taking birds that are new to the year for the most part. So what we're hunting and historically have hunted through March or through half of March, the season started in August and ended in March. And so you saw the flocks of sage grouse go through this maturation process where they're really easy to catch early in the year, and you've got a bunch of dumb babies that you can train your birds with and get their confidence up. As the season progresses, every sage grouse is hard, and every sage grouse is like a trophy, and you have to have a bird that's really dialed in to even be able to take one.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
So
it's interesting.
Yeah.
Does barbed wire fences play?
Huge.
Because I've heard that's like a huge problem with the sage because the way they fly, they fly low, right at the same height as the barbed wire, and they hit it and kill themselves.
Yep.
Do you think that's some kind of a law to change that, and ranchers fixing that would really help?
They've done a lot with reflectors and making the wires more visible, and it does seem to help quite a bit.
Okay.
But pretty much everything that we introduce to their environment has a detrimental effect.
Okay.
Whether it's highways and road traffic or power lines play a huge part in it. The reason for that is not necessarily the birds hitting the power lines, but it gives the eagles a place to perch.
Oh, that's good. That's a good angle. I didn't think of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
How common are eagles in your part?
Really common. Yeah. I've had a lot of birds get killed by eagles here.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. About that. It's going to be intense.
It is. It is intense. That's another advantage to having a passage bird too, is they're a lot more eagle wary. But
it's funny you mentioned that. I'm sorry to stop you there. No. I was flying a passage Harris hawk and a captive born Harris hawk. One day we were out. Some property owners were showing us around. We were hunting. The passage bird disappeared. The captive bird was just hanging out doing its normal thing with me. And then all of a sudden I'm like, where's the wild bird? I'm looking around everywhere. I can't find it. And then I see a bald eagle on top of a tree in the distance. Bald eagles are not very common here. I'm in North Carolina. You'll find bald eagles near rivers and lakes, but we weren't really anywhere near one. And then all of a sudden I'm realizing that the wild Harris hawk was underneath a bush on the ground, like cowering. That eagle, because it had no doubt experienced eagles in the wild in this warm desert. But this captive one had no clue. It was just,
I've had birds on I've had birds on a sage grouse that like literally just like laid down on top of the grouse, like hiding with one eye looking up to the sky, watching an eagle that's 2,000 feet up there, and
it's amazing.
And they just, birds that have tangled with eagles, they just know, and an IS bird that has never been around eagles and hasn't watched its parents reacting to them, knowing that they're a danger, they have a huge disadvantage. And every bird that I've lost has been an IS bird that did something stupid. And even with bald eagles too, like golden eagles are the ones that cause the most lost falcons. But even a bald eagle, if they go in and try to play grab ass with it or something, all that eagle has to do is turn around and grab them with one foot and it's over. Done.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've heard some people say they've had birds that have attacked eagles on the ground while they're on a sage grouse.
Mm-hmm.
The eagle comes in and the bird is, I'm assuming it's probably a chamber raised captive born bird, turns and comes at the eagle. Like what? What a stupid thing to do.
Well, most of the birds that I have lost, all except for maybe 2, have been birds that were on a kill and the eagle comes in and the falcon isn't watching for danger and the eagle just flies in above the sage, just skimming the ground. They maybe we're a mile away watching what happened. They see this falcon take a grouse down, and they come in just like a missile and kill the falcon, rip it to pieces, and eat the grouse. And it's pretty nasty. Like
are you curtailing your flight time based off of that? Because I think I heard somewhere on a podcast, or I read somewhere, that the eagles will try to eat in the morning, and it's safer to fly during the evening because they're already fed and it's less likely to have an interaction. Is that true? Do you do that?
The middle of the day seems to be the safest part, but I don't like flying that close to dark either, because no, they're very active at dusk and dawn. And so either one, like right there at the low light time, seems to be the most dangerous time.
Got it. Wow. And it sounds like you're flying predominantly gyrfalcons. Is that?
That's
accurate?
what I've focused on mostly. Yeah. For 24 years.
I'm fascinated with gyrfalcons. You couldn't pick a worse bird for my area.
Sure. Yeah, you got to live in the right area for them. Yep.
Yeah. We've had people tell us before that they're kind of illness prone. Gyrs are.
Yeah, sure. They can be.
And what can you say about that?
Well, it all has to do with your husbandry and the diseases that they get. You can get diseases from pigeons. You can get diseases from spores that are in your own house, that are in your carpet. You can get asper really easily, but you'd experience that with a goshawk too. And it's these northern species like goshawks and gyrfalcons that are the most susceptible to diseases like that. Gyrs specifically, I think, are pretty fragile in their lungs when it comes to spores. They don't have the resiliency that birds like a peregrine or a prairie falcon has.
Okay. I mean, it makes perfect sense, breathing that beautiful clean air up there, and then coming down here.
It's also humid during the summer, though.
But it's not nasty and polluted, and
right. Even though it's humid air, it's still clean humid air. It's not just the water; it's the existence of spores that exist in a more temperate climate.
Well, you bring up a good point about the carpet. I've never once thought about that.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest killer of gyrfalcons. Actually, is carpet.
Carpet's 101, bro. That's Nick Fox Bird of Prey Management Series. You don't remember that? You remember that back in the day? I watched that on
watched
repeat.
That DVD. No.
Oh, it's great.
He talks about carpet in it?
Yeah, he talks about watching out for rooms with fitted carpets and can transmit fungal spores.
Right.
Yeah. You have to get the bird on the lure.
The lure.
I must have watched his videos. Like, when I tell you I watched that whole Bird of Prey Management Series 500 times, I watched it. I would watch it every day. When I was finishing my homework, I'd go downstairs and turn it on before I got my license.
Was this VHS or DVD?
I think it was VHS, man. It was so good, though. If Nick Fox is here listening, because he's definitely listening, of course.
He's a big fan.
He's a huge fan. He should. They need to upload that to YouTube and make a YouTube channel with the whole series, because it's such a huge wealth of knowledge. Just basic training, just basic do's and don'ts. Freeze your pigeons, preparation of food, varied diet. Like, it's all just like awesome, good information that I just like drilled into my head as a kid. Just anything, because there was no like YouTube falconry videos, so I was just watching stuff I could get my hands on. Now I have a question for you, Jake. You mentioned passage birds, and then we're talking about gyrs. Have you had the opportunity to fly a passage gyr?
No, I haven't. In fact, this year may be the year, because I'm going to have my eye out.
Okay. Do they come down that far by you?
This is pretty close to the extension of their southern range during the winter. And so we do get them wandering through here quite a bit.
So you've laid eyes on them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've laid eyes on them. Yep.
That gets me excited.
What colors do you see?
Oh, just gray. The standard gray and the variations of gray. So
standard gray. It's standard gray. That's the best phase.
I agree.
That's the coolest phase.
I agree with you.
The white, the black. That's all designer stuff. You got to get the silver.
The white ones.
Well, of course, but the silver and that real light silver. Oh, they're so cool.
I love silver birds, but I've never seen one in the wild here. I've never seen a white bird in the wild here, but I've seen some pretty dark gray birds and some pretty light gray birds.
These bookends I have.
Oh, there you go.
In person, the likeness is really good.
I guess.
For the,
I think Jake would be able to tell a little bit better than us.
I can tell it's supposed to be a gyr.
It's like a seagull, just the beak is more predatory looking.
That's the thing about bird of prey art and decorations. There's so many bad representations of hawks and falcons and eagles, for that matter. Like, people will give me something with an owl on it, and it's like a Frankenstein owl. It's like a Eurasian great horned screech owl.
Yeah.
It's just an owl, man.
Yeah. So if the opportunity presents itself to you this year, in your area, because where I am, we do like, BC trapping and then a lot of ridge and, beach trapping. Mm-hmm. Would you do, from what the sounds of it, I would imagine you're driving around checking poles.
Yep.
And then setting up dogazas.
Not for a gyr.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know.
Yep.
So yeah. What would you do?
For a gyr, most likely you'd use a pigeon as bait.
A pigeon harness?
Not a pigeon harness. I would use a noose carpet.
So you would let the gyr kill the pigeon, get it off the pigeon, lay a carpet over it, and then disappear.
Yeah, it's actually pretty easy to trap a bird that way, a falcon that way. If I was trapping peregrines, I'd be using a harness pigeon or a dogaza. If I was trapping prairie falcons, some people like a dogaza for a prairie falcon, but I don't. I prefer either a noose carpet or a hoop trap. And a hoop trap.
Yes. Can you explain that for us?
Yeah. So have you guys seen a hoop or a fly trap? Some people call them.
Probably saw it in a book somewhere. Is that the one where it's like a ring of big long nooses?
Yeah, it's a ring like a basketball hoop, but then you've got nooses all the way around the ring, and you put a bait bird in the middle of it, and they come by and strafe the bird that's like a sparrow or a starling that's in the middle of that's weighted down. They come by and lower their feet to grab it, and as their feet pass through the nooses, they get caught. The hoop is connected to a line and an anchor with like a bungee cord or something to take up the
pressure on the leg,
the pressure on the feet. Yeah, but it's very, very effective.
I don't know anybody that's implemented that before. That's very interesting.
Everybody out west that traps prairie falcons has probably tried it, but it is a great go-to trap because it's just so effective and easy to do.
Sounds like it. Yeah, that's a new one for me. That's like advanced out west western falconry. I don't. Yeah, never.
Sure, you'd use it out there for merlin trapping. They're great for trapping merlins.
Listen, I mean, I'm spoiled personally to death out here because everyone's, you guys out there use dogazas, this and that. I mean, we set up mist nets with pockets, three sides. I mean, you're catching 3 at a time, 2 at a time. This whole falling down thing with the dogaza and going out and I mean, we just run out and pull one out, and I'm crouching under a bush pulling one out while another one's flying in. Like, the mist net is just so, especially where we are, right? We're in a major flyaway on the East Coast.
That's the difference.
So we're a little spoiled. We're not like hunting for them. We're just setting up, and hundreds of them, thousands of them are coming through at the right time.
You've got that migration corridor. You can have just a stationary trapping station, and you hide in a blind, and you can trap all day, right?
Yeah,
Out here, it's not so much like that because it's so much more spread out. The migration is more spread out. You don't have any there are a few corridors, and if you're trapping goshawks, you can ridge trap because they're up there cruising along the ridges through certain funnels.
Yep.
But most of the trapping that you do out here is opportunistic. So you want to have a trapping system that's easily deployed and quickly deployed because you may only have a few seconds to get it out there.
Now, how easy do they spook off of a pole?
Perfect question. I was thinking the same thing.
After they've killed something, they'll go back to the pole. So if you're trapping a gyrfalcon or a prairie falcon using a noose carpet, you let it kill the bird, and then you just go and bump them off of it, and they don't go far because they already put in the work to kill it. They've got blood in their beak, they've tasted it, and so they've possessed it in their mind. So they'll watch what you're doing, like, hey, buddy, get away from my food.
So do you toss the pigeon with a real heavy weight on it that they can't carry with the harness?
Just like
and a heavy weight?
Like a pound is all. Like it doesn't have to be really heavy. Something the weight of a hammerhead. It doesn't have to be very heavy at all. Just enough that the pigeon can't fly away with it. If you have something like a dowel, you see a lot of these old books where it's a pigeon with just a dowel and the line wrapped around the dowel.
Mm-hmm.
You're asking for trouble there, because when you throw the pigeon out, the pigeon can fly with it, and it's getting tangled around fences and all kinds of stuff. I'd much rather have a line that the pigeon is connected to, where the pigeon hits the end of the line, you can't go any further. So you have a longer line, maybe 20 feet. But
when you throw a BC out here for red tails, it's all relatively close. Are you finding it's like 100 yards away you throw the pigeon, or?
Well, it can be a lot farther than that. I've trapped birds where they were in a soar 500 feet up, and I've thrown a pigeon out, and they'll come down in a stoop and hit it.
That's cool.
But typically what I'll do is, if I see a bird that I want to trap that's sitting on a power pole, I'll park my truck and walk out into the field that's adjacent to the pole. I'll walk out there maybe 50 yards or so, and just throw the pigeon out there, and then walk back to the truck. And the pigeon's out there flopping and everything. And the falcon, I typically like to get to within about 200 or 300 yards of the bird. Okay. And when you're trapping a falcon, you're always analyzing everything. You're analyzing the way that the bird reacts, because some birds won't come to a pigeon. You want a bird that does, because you want a bold one. And a pigeon's kind of big, right? So you want a bird that's got that boldness and doesn't hesitate. So I've had birds that come to the pigeon literally as it's leaving my hand. I've had other birds that sit there and look at it for a half an hour before they decide to come in on it. And you're analyzing all of this, and you're saying, okay, well, maybe this bird ate a little earlier and he's just not motivated right now. But if you see that he's got an empty crop and he's really delayed response coming to it, you'd say, maybe that's not a bird I'd want. And then you just move on and find another one.
That's the fun part about trapping, right? Is you always, you can think of this bird's experience, its personality. No, I'm serious, man. You drop the trap and that thing,
the same thing.
Yeah, that thing's in the air, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, that's a gamey bird right there. Yeah. Or somebody that you can't, we're up at the ridge flashing for red tails, and a Sharpie comes in and gets caught in the net, on a full size pigeon. You're like, oh, I kind of want this Sharpie. He came in for this pigeon.
Right.
It's cool. You get to kind of fantasize. I was thinking though, the dowel, if it's lighter, like you were saying, a more hesitant bird, if the weight for the pigeon was slightly lighter and the bird could actually fly for some distance, but obviously hindered looking, would be way more enticing to get the bird to hit, in my mind.
I agree. But there again,
you don't want those birds.
You're analyzing the bird that has so much boldness that the bird that I want anyway. When I'm trapping a passage bird, I want the bird that is off of the pole and coming towards me, and the pigeon, the second it leaves my hand. Yeah. As soon as they see those first wing flaps, they're off the pole and they're after it. And then on top of that, I don't want the bird that just comes in and buzzes it. I want the bird that hits it on the first pass, the one that's just coming for blood. Yeah. And so, you're just
makes perfect sense.
You're looking at all of it.
Yeah. I had another question that is escaping my mind now. Oh, okay. So I've heard a myth. I don't know if it's a myth. It sounds that it could be perfectly on par with prairie falcons. It sounds like you have a little experience with prairie falcons.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Is it true that 1 out of every 10 birds is suitable for falcons?
I'd say that's a little harsh.
Okay.
I'd say it's probably 1 out of every 2 or 3 that you selectively trap.
Okay, so some of them are just, they may come and hit it, but then they're just a nightmare and they don't calm down. Or
Could
what are we
be,
looking at?
some are a lot harder to man, but some birds that are hard to man, it's just a matter of like finding their response weight and getting over that first hump of manning, and then that same bird may just be a jewel after that.
Right.
So I'd say that during the manning process is really where I'm analyzing most of this, what their head is like. And then if it's a bird that caught a pigeon or that killed a pigeon in a way that you like and was really aggressive on it, didn't hesitate, it's got a good amount of weight on its body, and the manning process goes smoothly, I'd say that it's not the exception to the rule at all to have a bird that just goes through all of the steps well. I think that there's something to this too, where that boldness that you experience during during the time you're trapping, I think that actually is reflective of how the manning process is going to be.
Okay.
Because I would much rather have a bold bird to man, because they seem to tame down better, like they have more bravery or something. It's the
interesting
birds that are timid are hard to man.
That's interesting. Yeah, red tails, right, Aaron? I'm just trying to think. Like, I haven't flown a red tail in like 8 or 9 years.
I'm just thinking about the one I have right now. I trapped this massive red tail. So I don't know if you do ounces or grams. 49
grams.
Okay.
I mean, I use grams, but I can translate ounce in my head pretty quickly.
49 ounces, which is, let's see. Yeah, big bird. But man, she's just like, so about 1,400 grams. She is, she was a real pain in the ass to man. She's clumsy. She's bitey. I've never had a red tail do this. You can't get within reach of her beak without her biting you, and like biting you hard. She's never tried to foot me. I mean, she's big. I wouldn't want to get footed by her, but man, her bites, I was crying about it earlier. They give me blood blisters wherever she gets me. Like, but she's got this, but she's huge. So that's why I'm giving her a chance.
Because of her size.
Yeah, because of her size. So she has that going for her. If she was like your average 40-ounce red tail, 42-ounce red tail, she'd be gone.
So let me ask you this. What are you hunting with her?
Well, pretty
nothing
much
nothing that he needs 1,400 grams for. But
no. Squirrels and rabbits,
Squirrels and rabbits. Okay, you're hunting squirrels and rabbits. You need to be going for that 1,250 gram female, man.
Yeah. We all know that's the better. That's the best red tail is like the 1,200 gram one. We all know that, but something about that big bird,
Aaron's on an ego. He's on an ego trip with this bird.
Right. It's like having a jacked up pickup, right?
Yeah. So it's completely useless. You get one shot at it, and then you gotta wait 30 minutes for the reset, and then you can continue your hunt.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm just teasing you, man.
No, you're telling the truth. We all know the best red tail is that good average size female red tail. It doesn't get better. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that I've found about birds, the best ones in falconry, doesn't matter the species. For me anyway, in the amount of birds that I've flown, just on the large side of average has been like the best crop of birds for me.
Yeah. There's nothing. Like I said, I've never caught more game with this North American, and I was flying these big albitus Finnish crosses and pure albitus, and like, as far as I'm concerned, and I have a fresh one. I have a fresh imprint out in my chamber, and they're just like, compared to the North American, they're just like, it's just so unnecessarily big. It's like almost like a hindrance in the field how big they are. You'd
have fun out here with our white-tailed jacks.
Oh yeah, that's where they would shine. Not chasing squirrels and rabbits in thick cover.
Right.
The North American, just even the Tiercels I've flown are just like phenomenal compared to these big giant, European birds. It's just like a little bit too big. It's a step above a red tail in terms of what you can do with it, but it's like way below a North American or a Tiercel, just in terms of where they can get when they need to make that
crashing
grab.
Power of a red tail.
Some birds do. Some of them don't crash. But I that one Karen bird, I mean, she would punch through brush like a red tail, like a bowling ball, which was a little strange because I heard, that doesn't, and the other birds I've flown didn't really do that, but she would do that a lot and catch them. But the North American, I mean, they go in right behind it and fly right through the brush behind them, for God's sakes, and grab them. It's crazy.
There's nothing quite like that. Rabbit in the heavy brush, red tail just pitches out from their perch, and you just hear the smack like a bowling ball from 300 feet in the air being dropped onto the rabbit. There's nothing like that.
Something that I've always wanted to do is snowshoe hares with a gauze.
You really should. That's my dream. A rough grouse and a snowshoe hare is my bucket list prey species.
Yeah, right.
Do you have that in Idaho?
We've got a lot of rough grouse here. I just got done with an elk hunt.
Say that again, Jake?
I said I just got done with an elk hunt, and that's what I lived on the whole time I was out there. When I go on these hunts, I usually will go out for a week, and I don't take any food with me or anything. So
that's cool.
I'm just eating squirrels and grouse the whole time.
How are you killing the grouse?
With my bow. I just
tips.
I take a couple of blunt arrows with me and just shoot them on the ground. Recurve
or compound?
It's a hybrid longbow, so it's a reflex deflex, which is kind of an in between a longbow and a recurve.
Okay, so did you get an elk on that hunt? Because I remember we postponed our interview because of your hunt, which is awesome.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I was out there while you were texting me. As I would get little bits of service, I was getting your messages. But no, because I was using traditional archery, the best way I think, or the most effective way I think to hunt elk with a traditional bow would probably be over water in a tree stand.
Right.
But I was calling elk. And calling elk when you're hunting solo is really difficult because the elk come in straight at you and they get to like 40 or 50 yards and they stop and look and they're trying to find the elk that they're hearing.
Right.
And if they don't see it, they may just turn around and bugger off. But that happens a lot more than a bull just continuing to walk past you, which is what you would need to shoot them. So I did not take an elk this year, but I called in 4 bulls that were all within shooting range. I just couldn't get a clear shot because of that, because I was hunting alone. And when you're hunting with a companion, they would typically set up behind you and call. That way the elk will walk past you and you can stick an arrow in them as they pass you at 20 yards or so. But yeah, I was hunting alone, and it was mostly just for the experience of going out. I'm not bummed out about not killing one. In fact, the season opens up again here in about a month for me to take one with my muzzleloader. So I'll go back out in November and get it done.
Awesome. Yeah, there's nothing if you're hunting like that, there's nothing wrong with going home empty-handed. But you got the experience out of it, which is the coolest part.
Got a lot of video footage that I'm editing now, and it was a fantastic experience. Had a great hunt. The elk were just on fire this year, so it was pretty good.
Just calling an elk in successfully would, give me a thrill.
Oh yeah, when they're screaming 50 yards away from you, it sends shivers up your whole body.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It rattles your bones. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're incredible. I grew up hunting, and I never hunted elk, but I watched a bazillion videos, and it's like, for the people that hunt them, they like when you are cow calling, like that elk like knows like almost exactly where that's coming from.
I mean, to within a couple of feet, they're like a GPS unit.
So if you're calling them and then they're coming through and they're like, wait a minute, I don't see this cow that is calling all crazy. Then they get all suspicious, especially in an area where they're hunted, and then they're just like, all right, I'm out. Something's weird. Something's off here.
They have the most incredible hearing. You can call to one that's out of sight, like they cannot see where the sound is coming from, and they'll walk right to the spot.
Right.
Like right to it. And they'll hold up 30 or 40 or 60 yards away and start looking. And they're like, okay, I should be seeing elk right now, but I'm not.
Yeah.
So something's up.
It's fascinating, man. That is so neat. On that same subject, we'll just touch on it briefly because we're kind of going back a little bit, but it was something that I wanted to cover with you. You were very impressive on the show, and you lasted a long time with very little equipment.
Thank you.
Did that come from? Where did that come from? Did you know?
My survival abilities?
Yeah. How'd you learn all that? Did you take classes? Did you just acquire these skills over time, or?
I did acquire them over time. I started at a very young age. So growing up in East Idaho in the 80s and 90s, this place was quite a bit different than it is now. There are a lot more people here than there used to be. And my father was a civil engineer, and he had his own engineering business here. Most of the work that he did while I was growing up in this area was in Fremont County, right around Yellowstone. So we're just a few miles away from the Yellowstone border. And so what he did mostly here was designing roads that cut through the timber, through the forests. You know, if the county needed to build a new road for access to a community or a town or whatever, my dad was the guy. And so he started taking me into the woods with him when I was about 2 years old. And wow. I'd go to work with him all day, and he just turned me loose. And so I was...
You have to survive while I'm at work.
Pretty much. I mean, but I had I wasn't an irresponsible child. I kept my eye on the crew. Right. So I'd get brave and wander off a while, but I always came back. And so my dad wasn't too afraid of it. Now, we do live in grizzly country. So yeah, could a grizzly have grabbed me and run off, or a black bear? Absolutely. But my dad always brewed recklessness in me. He was always encouraging me to push my own limits. And he wanted me to go out and have those experiences and break bones and get cut. And I was always, as a kid, I was always catching animals and bringing them home. I had a pet fox when I was a kid. And
that's cool.
This was all stuff that I caught while the survey crew was working through the woods. I'm off chasing animals and, finding baby furry things, to take home with me. But then the thing is my dad would always let me keep them, but then he's like, all right, it's time to put it back. And so, except for my fox, that one I kept.
That is cool.
How long did you have that one?
She started to get mature. Wasn't too long. I mean, it might have been 6 or 7 months, and she started acting kind of wild. And so she was grown up enough that I actually took her out and released her. And she, I'm sure, did fine. But
when I was a kid, I had raccoons, and they do
raccoons.
That
we had raccoons. Yeah. Yep.
I heard they make great pet. Is it true they make great pet?
They get, like Jake was saying, wild.
Yeah, when they start going through puberty is when things really start getting nuts.
It makes perfect sense.
They get really aggressive. But so anyway, to make a long story longer, just being surrounded by wilderness through my childhood is what made me want to be able to live comfortably out there in any conditions. That's where I feel most at home, is in the wilderness. I always have. That's been my fortress of solitude my whole life, where you go out there to recharge and become primal. You tap into a part of yourself that, for me, it actually feels more human than what we experience, here. Being a part of the food chain, being a part of the world, not just observing it, but being in it. And there are some things that set us apart from every other animal on the planet. And one of those is the fact that we need to use our brain in order to survive. If we shut our brain off, our body isn't capable of chasing down a gazelle and eating it. We have to, we're a tool maker, and we have to use tools. So I learned how to make all of the primitive tools that I could. I became a flint knapper, making primitive bows, arrows, atlatls, slings, shepherd slings to kill things with.
So cool.
I grew up doing all of this. And then when I was in my 20s, I got hired on as a head instructor for a wilderness therapy program in southern Utah. And this is where we would take at-risk youth, kids that were like inner city kids. We take them out into the wilderness in groups to teach them survival skills and how to navigate by the stars, how to make traps, how to make friction fire, process water, all of the things that you would do in a tribal situation. And they learn to like rely on each other for not just for companionship, but for doing certain tasks, like living in a group out in the wilderness, wandering around like nomads from water source to water source. And some of these kids were out there over 100 days doing this. And I spent 3 years doing that. And that's where I really honed a lot of my survival skills. But after that period of time in my life, I just kept up with it, kept developing things. To me, falconry is actually the ultimate survival skill.
I agree.
So if you think about
Just
that, what you're doing,
convenient, Casey.
What?
Yeah,
Casey likes that answer because it's convenient.
No, it's awesome.
Convenient.
Every time, for me personally, every time I go in the field and I catch something, I not every time, but a lot of times, like especially if it's cold and rainy, I'm like, all right, so I would eat it, and then I would build a shelter. I'd put my bird. I'd bend a sapling to make a perch for my bird,
Mhm.
and you
Sure.
know, like I think of all that kind of stuff. It's
all
like
there.
it's fun. Yeah, it's super cool.
My first bow perch was exactly that.
Nice, perfect.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
So yeah,
go ahead, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, it's just, you know, and that's why falconry falls in line with everything else that I do. Whether it's, you know, I'm also a fly fisherman. I'm an archery hunter. I just try to do all of the things that enrich my life, make me feel fulfilled, and make me feel like my ancestors would think that I was worthy of them. You know,
right?
Because
exactly.
your ancestors, everybody's ancestors, were out there doing this. They lived through an ice age, you know, and we've been on this planet for 250,000, 300,000 years without changing. So we all have it in us to be able to do this still.
Yeah.
You know, we're still that same species, but we're so detached from the world now, from the real world, which, I mean, it's real. It's the most real world to me, is the wilderness. And I think that I would be doing myself a disservice if I didn't continue to get better and better at all of these things, because to me, that's really what it means to be human.
That was beautiful. And I agree 100%. I mean, it has to be wired in us, because just thinking about the first deer I killed and like that feeling, pulling the bow back, killing it, you're shaking. It's like something comes out of inside of you that's like overwhelming, like something that's like, it's like, where did this come from? And it feels so right.
It feels right.
It doesn't feel wrong. It doesn't feel like evil. It just feels like this is something that like I am supposed to do.
Right.
And like over time, we have taken that away, and now going to work and making money is like the substitute for that.
Exactly.
And it's like kind of like, and it's not fulfilling most of the time. Unless
like
you're doing abatement and you're flying birds, that's but like if you're plumbing a house and you're exhausted and you're like slinging pipe around, it's like, this doesn't feel natural. This is something like that's not, you know, getting out in the woods and harvesting stuff and actually physically, like I just shot a deer 2 weeks ago. I just got you know, and my wife is cooking it, and it's like, it just feels like natural to do that.
Right.
You know, it's crazy.
Now think of it this way too. Let's back it up, say 10,000 or 15,000 years. Now we all have maybe been living in communities, you know, small tribal communities, where or a village, even a stationary village, and everybody in the village has their job, right? But everybody in that village also has the capability of providing food in those situations. You look at, I mentioned on the show, Utsi, the Iceman. So 5,000 BC, this guy gets frozen in the Alps where he's preserved until people in the 90s dig him out of the ice, and everything's preserved. There, all of his tools are there. His clothing's there. The tattoos on his skin are there. He's got a copper axe, a bow, fire making material, his arrows. You know, this was a guy that lived in a village, but he had the ability to cross the Alps and kill his food on the way. And that's, to me, that's really not much different than a guy like myself who has a job at home and does his thing to like be a part of his community and support his family, but he can still go out and provide food in these situations. Like, you don't need a grocery store to be able to provide food. Like, to me, that's empowering.
100%. And actually, you shouldn't even go to the grocery store, let's be perfectly honest.
Yeah, not anymore. That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Don't get me started.
Right.
Earlier talking about shitting. We weren't meant to sit on the toilet, just like we weren't meant to sit in an office all day.
Yeah.
No.
We weren't meant to look at the blue lights of screens like we're doing at this very moment.
Right.
But because to Jake's point, we haven't changed at all. And what'd you say?
250 to 300,000 years. We haven't changed.
Yeah, we're physically the exact same beings as the ones that were throwing spears at.
Except we're probably a little bit dumber now.
Dumber, softer, weaker, probably.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Some of us were allowed to live when we shouldn't have.
We're like that. We're like the version of humans in that movie WALL-E.
Yeah.
Have
you seen that one, Casey?
I don't think so. No.
They kind of like devolve into all being pretty fat and sedentary.
Piles of mush.
Yeah, they can't walk. They can't even walk. They're just big fat people in a...
I think we're already there, to be honest.
Yeah, we're pretty close.
Some of us are fighting it, but I think we're already pretty close.
Right.
So, Jake, I had a couple questions going back to the whole falconry and dogs thing. Dogs, first of all, what do you have? Are you running dogs with birds?
Yeah, I've run setters for 30 years.
Wow. What type of setters?
They're kind of my own mix of field trial lines and Llewellyn lines. So I have 3 right now. I used to run I wouldn't say I ran a kennel, but I mean, I would put out probably 4 or 5 litters a year, but I backed off from doing that. It's
a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. I've selected it back down to 3 dogs, and one of them is a pure Llewellyn line, and the other 2 are a mix of him and the field trial lines that I've used for a long time. They're good dogs.
So when you're saying a mix, are you doing like traditional houndsman stuff where you're breeding best to best regardless of the breed?
No,
they're all Llewellyns.
They're registered as English setters except for my Llewellyn.
Okay.
So when you breed a Llewellyn, which with the field dog stud book, they've always recognized the Llewellyn as a separate registry.
Okay.
And there are a lot of people that would say the Llewellyn is its own breed, but it's not. They're an English setter. They're a strain of English setter. So all of the field trial dogs that we have in this country are all genetically descended of Llewellyn and Laverack setters. Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
So if you were to breed a Llewellyn setter to an English setter, you'd register it as an English setter.
Okay.
But you wouldn't be able to register it as a Llewellyn because there was a branch out of that line.
Interesting.
So I think it's I think it's cool that they've preserved that pure line of setter. They're beautiful dogs. They're intelligent, affectionate. They're like everything that I like in a dog. They're really good field dogs. But I do like the wider ranging, fast running, horizon to horizon field trial lines too. And so what I end up getting is kind of the best of both worlds when I breed those 2 lines together. I register them as English setters, but they're very heavily, probably like 80% Llewellyn.
Interesting.
And you get a bit bigger running dog.
Yeah, the bigger running stuff is just so foreign to me and Aaron, I would imagine, because everything we do is tight and in close. So you're basically looking for a dog that can cover some serious ground and produce game.
Yeah, because out on the Sage, you may run your dog for 8 or 9 miles before you give them a rest.
Right.
Like they're out there really covering it. So the quartering that they do. You can have them quartering a half a mile, where back before GPS, we were all putting telemetry on our dogs, and just like houndsmen, and depending on the beep that we were getting, the signal, that's how we would tell if they were on point. And things have gotten a lot easier with GPS, but yeah, a lot of times your dog would go on point, clear out of sight, and you're walking a quarter of a mile out into the sage to find out where they're at.
I feel like that before the GPS stuff, that probably made it a little bit more exciting, I would imagine.
GPS made everything a lot less exciting.
Right.
And so I actually, with falconry, I don't even like using it because I look at my phone too much.
Right.
Sitting there staring at the screen rather than looking up and flying my bird,
Absolutely.
Now, and it's a self-control thing. I could easily just look at the flight after it's all done, but it's like, it's too tempting. You're looking at how high is the bird? Is he climbing? All of these things. You're getting the data off of the phone.
You're overloaded with data.
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy.
But for me, it does make me lose a little bit of that excitement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The edge of your seat stuff, because you're worried.
Yeah, of course. But so now you're as back to the earth as you can get, but you still obviously use GPS. So you would recommend that most falconers flying longwinds would use a GPS system.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's there. It's a fantastic tool. What Marshall has done with that is absolutely amazing. I never thought that we'd have something like that we could put on our birds. When I started out, we were using, Luxander, just the beep, the single signal beep, having to wrap our
electrical tape.
Yeah, using electrical tape on our transmitters and stuff like that. And bells. I flew with just bells for a long time before I could afford telemetry. I was flying my birds for probably 6 years without telemetry, just using bells.
Yeah.
But
Same
we
here.
talked about it before on this podcast that at some point that was technology.
That's right. Yeah, that was like state of the art. Wow, you can tell where your bird is 100 yards away.
Yeah. I'm not using that. That makes it too easy. Takes the fun away. Right. It's just going to keep progressing, and it's just an age-old discussion. But my personal thought is if you have access to it, you don't lean on it as a crutch because it takes away from your skill development, but definitely put it on the bird, God forbid.
Right. Yeah, it's there. Use it.
I think
it's expensive, but it's worth it.
Falconers now are probably more successful than they were pre-telemetry and pre-GPS.
Well, sure. Yeah, for sure. A lot less birds are lost.
And they still get lost.
But I would say this, okay? Like, not against. Yeah, they do. True.
Just kidding, everybody. This is a joke. Okay, it's a joke.
No, it's not.
All right. It's not. But
probably,
it is.
Probably go on Facebook right now and see where somebody's saying, "Hey, I lost my bird." Everybody check.
Yeah. Check the bird watcher website.
Check out the English falconry pages, dude. People are finding gyrfalcons and lantern falcons with leashes.
Right. I think what I would say with all of the advent of this technology, though, I think that the enjoyment of falconry for like the average falconer has probably gone up because of all of this.
Right.
But I don't know if I would say that the quality of falconer has gone up because of this stuff.
It mathematically, it can't go up.
No.
Because if you have too many safeguards, it will just. That's why I think. Did we have a guy on the show, Aaron, or was it somebody? Somebody was saying that they don't want their apprentices using GPS or anything like that for like their apprenticeship because they think it just.
I know people who won't let their apprentices have telemetry. Period, which I think is silly, personally.
I guess if you're worried about your reputation and your apprentice losing birds, but at the end of the day, that apprentice is going to be paying a lot more attention to what's going on.
That's true.
And
I think I would even, depending on the species that we're using, flying a long wing, I would say absolutely use the telemetry, right? Because you're going to get a really frustrated apprentice if you don't have it. But if you're back east and you're flying a red tail on squirrels, I'd be tempted to tell them to not use it.
Right. Yeah, because it just takes away from their development of their skill. It's just it's a fact. If you have the ability to pull your phone out and know exactly where your bird is without having to listen for birds, listen for bells, walk around, make educated guesses on what direction she went.
Right. I'll tell you a skill. I'll tell you a skill that I've watched be completely lost. And that is watching how the other birds in the wild can tell you where your bird is.
Listen for the blue jays and crows.
Jays, crows, magpies, starlings. It doesn't matter. Like just like looking on the horizon and watching for signs of birds harassing your hawk or from fleeing from your hawk or whatever. I very rarely see anything like that used anymore because your phone or your face is looking at a screen for a GPS signal, or you're just listening for a signal from telemetry. Yeah. There are a lot of things that you can do that'll show you where your bird is if you have a dead battery.
Yeah, that's like the number one go-to thing is like listen for the birds, even squirrels, barking at your bird somewhere. All right. So quick story on this because it's a perfect. I loaned a bird to a friend of mine when I was entering this North American last year, and he ended up losing the bird. No hard feelings. It was just a fluke situation, but the GPS didn't connect or it wasn't working. And all of us, it was like 5-6 of us that went down there every day for like a week looking. And I can't even tell you how many red tails I found in neighborhoods. Just from hearing crows and other birds harassing, and I'd be pinpointing the noise, and then all of a sudden I'd come around the side of the thing, and there's a red tail sitting in a tree, and there's a bunch of, and I'm like, and it's cool because I found it, but then it's like, oh, it's not the gauze, it's
sure,
but like you can just like stand there for a minute and listen, and there's cues, not always, but a lot of times there's cues going on all around you,
right?
What's going on?
Yep.
I think in order to be a successful falconer, you have to be curious about, nature and the landscape of where you're at. There's a lot more to read than just cutting a bird loose somewhere and just catching things. At least I get a lot more enjoyment out of being more tuned into everything else that's going on.
Right. Yeah, I think falconers in general, I think are that's one of the things that sets them apart from the rest of the sportsmen out there is just how curious they are.
Right. Yeah. It's a great point. It's a great point. There's a lot more levels to what we're doing, and you can get away with doing it without being intimate with the landscape, with your prey, with stuff like that. But I think to be the full package is to know your bird, to know the birds you're flying, their habitat, their flight patterns when you're trying to trap them, their habits, and then knowing the quarry that you're going for and where they are, where they live, looking for sign. Because that's a huge thing that people don't realize is looking for sign. I mean, if you're going to your sponsor's fields all the time, that's great. But, you got to find your own. And to find your own sometimes takes a little skill. You got to kind of know what you're looking for, choose pellets. I wouldn't even, if I went out by you, I'd be lost. I wouldn't even know what the heck to look for. Mm-hmm. I'd be like, oh, there's some sages. I guess there's sage grouse in there. I would just stumble around blindly.
Could be.
I don't know. You know what I mean? But I'm sure over the years you've patterned them and you kind of have it. That was another question I had a little on this podcast. We like to sometimes get a little deeper. And I was curious when you're talking about your setters, like I've heard of guys letting a dog, like driving slow on a road and then letting the dogs run next to the truck, like on a rural road. And then they'll kind of get the scent of a covey, or if they're even called a covey. And then you get out and kind of work it from there. Or are you just cutting them loose and just freehanding it? Like where you think there's...
I'm cutting them loose and freehanding it and giving them as much exposure as possible when they're pups.
Okay.
So, and I don't mean like little puppies. It's a, it's guided development, right? You don't want to take a 4-month-old puppy and turn them loose in sage country and expect to have a point, but it does happen. But everything is just kind of it's just baby steps, all in the direction that you want to move. And you develop the dog in a very loose way. I do. Okay. I like for my dogs to figure as much of it out for themselves as they can, rather than forcing it on them. There are the way that I train, you might get a kick out of this, but I teach like 3 commands to my dogs. And then with those 3 commands, I turn them loose in the sage and I let them figure it out. And they have enough instinct. They have enough ability, their whole, their nose, their attention to me, all of that stuff is kind of genetic. I mean, it's hard to take a knucklehead dog and turn him into something that pays attention to you all the time. But one of the reasons why I like the species that I use, or the breed of dog that I use, is because of how naturally inclined they are to want to please you. And so when you throw in the mix of their instincts to hunt and to point, and then add that other dynamic of them wanting to please you, all it takes is a couple of commands, and then you can just turn them loose and let them do their job. And they figure it out real quick when you're happy with what they're doing and not. And they've got a very different brain, I think, than from a pointer, for instance. The setters that I have, their greatest love in life is you. Okay. Their second greatest love is birds. But they would choose you over the birds, I think. And I like having that close relationship with my dogs. And one of the things about that is that at the end of the day, they're coming into the house with you and they're laying down at your feet and they're tired. They feel good. You feel good. You give them a taste of grouse. It's just, they know when you're happy with them. And where with other species that are a little more hard-headed, it's more about like, the reward may be more of the experience of the hunt, right? These setters, they are so tuned in with you that they want to make you happy in the field. So
that's super fascinating. That, as you're talking about that, it just reminded me, right, Aaron, of Derek's episode. And he said something that kind of shocked me, and it kind of made me think a little bit, because when I want to pick a dachshund, to run, I want the one that's the most interested in the rabbit carcass that's in the pen. And the one that's coming up to the gate and trying to lick me is not really the one that I want. I want the one that's like just fighting over that carcass in the middle. And I'm like, that's the one I want. But Derek, who runs cockers, he thinks the best dogs are the ones that come up to you immediately and run right up to you, and they're very agreeable and they want your attention. And he says that produces a better dog because they want, like you were saying, the approval of what you're telling them, and it's more of an agreeable dog than the one that's fighting the other siblings for whatever prey species is in the in the pen with them. So that's very interesting that you said that. So is that how you choose a puppy?
No, actually, the way that I choose a puppy, and this is what's so interesting about that, is that because this breed of dog, they all have that instinct to be like every one of mine do. I know there are other setters, other lines of setters, different kennels that are not as attached to their people as my dogs are. But like, I could randomly choose a puppy out of any of my litters, and they're going to have that kind of relationship with the person that they're with. So I don't even have to worry about that part of it when selecting a pup. So when I'm looking at a litter and I want to keep a dog from that litter, I'm looking for the guy that is out on his own. He breaks away from the other dogs and he's out there sniffing, where his nose is just like a vacuum cleaner, and he's exploring and has some boldness, because it's the combination of those two things. I already know that I've got the personability in that breed, but I'm looking for the dog for myself that gets out there and explores.
That's very interesting. That's just great information in general, I think. That's awesome. Yeah, and when you're talking about training your setters, I thought that there's like this whole, I'm sure there is a little bit, but like this whole process to like launchers and stay and stuff like that. And I'm sure there is, but the way you were describing it, I was like, it sounds like you run dachshunds, because pretty much the most important command, right, Aaron, is just recall.
Yeah.
It's just recall. And then the rest is instinct. Get out there, find rabbits, because you're going to flush the rabbit. You're going to get crazy out of your mind excitement, and then you're going to try to replicate that. And as long as you'll come back to me when I call you and need you, that's all that really matters at the end of the day.
Yeah.
For us, at least.
The commands that I use with my dogs are come, whoa, sit, and stay. And that's it.
Yeah.
That's really all I teach them. Well, I will teach them heel too, because there are situations when I'm walking back, I want them right by my side. But
that's good.
It's a very limited number of commands that I teach my dogs, and the rest of it is just getting them out there on birds, getting their nose in it, letting them fall in love with finding these big flocks of grouse, because these grouse can be kind of overwhelming to a young dog. We've got flocks that are like, say you've got 500 or 1,000 grouse in a flock midwinter.
What kind of grouse are these? Sage grouse?
Sage grouse, yeah. And so
wow.
these
dogs
their
flocks were that big.
They'll smell them from a quarter of a mile away and go on point.
From a quarter mile away, they'll be on point.
A young dog will smell that whole flock. You got the wind blowing in their face.
They're right. They got to be right here somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not even an exaggeration for a young dog. And so what you have to do is then give them just enough exposure. You're not teaching them anything. They're teaching themselves.
Right.
You just you provide the exposure, and they do it themselves. They figure it out that, okay, I'm smelling a flock of grouse right now. And they've got their head pointed way up in the sky, and they're just drinking in that scent. And then you see them just work right into the scent to the point where it's just got to be overwhelming for them because you've got so many grouse in this flock, and you're getting a point that's, say, 50 yards away. Now, that's a workable point, but you still want them to get in there a little bit closer. And so you're kind of having to push them into them. Like, you're encouraging them, like, move forward, easy does it, and they eventually figure out what a bird smells like when it's 50 feet or 100 feet away from them. So
that's great stuff, man. That just got me. I just felt like I was in the moment. So then in that moment, you're flashing your glove? Are you yelling, or the falcon is just right over you?
The falcon isn't. No, I like to fly high and wide.
High and wide.
So I'll put the falcon up. And it's the same kind of thing like when you're teaching these dogs. It's all about the experiences and the exposure. And because you're always kind of guiding the development of these animals that you have a relationship with, you provide the reward at the opportune moment. Okay. Right? Yeah. And so with a bird that is learning how to fly on grouse, you want them climbing. Okay, you don't ever want them setting their wings, because you're going after. You know that the success of the hunt is going to be determined by the height of your bird and the flush, so that the flush is at the right time and your bird is in the right position. But because I fly gyrfalcons, a gyrfalcon can outfly pretty much anything out there. They can tail chase a sage grouse for 3 miles and catch it.
Jeez, yeah.
Okay, they're cruising along at 70, 80 miles an hour, chasing them. So what you want is a bird that is really high, and some people would say out of position, but to me, it's not out of position. I want them looking away from me. And then I don't move forward for the flush unless the bird is actually flying away from me and climbing. It's the combination of the two things. He's got to have his head turned away and climbing in the sky. If he's starting to drift towards me as I walk, I stop. And that's
interesting.
You're taking away a reward. You're like, no, I'm not going to flush unless you're doing this other thing. And so they turn around and they start climbing again, and then you move forward. And so the bird learns that, okay, I'll get a flush if I'm flying out and climbing up away. And the reason why that I like them being out away from me. And I'm talking like, several hundred, more than that. I mean, a quarter of a mile out away, even a half a mile out away.
Okay.
And because I like those flights that just cover the whole sky. So
Jeez.
what I'm always aiming for is a 1,000-foot pitch at least, which is hard to do. And I don't always acquire that. I don't always achieve that, but I like a flight that's 1,000 feet up and at least 1,000 feet out.
Jeez, man.
Yeah.
That's opposite. That's literally the opposite of what I would think I would need to do.
Yeah.
What I could see that you would get a cleaner flush if they didn't even know it was there, right?
Oh, they know.
Oh, they know already?
Oh,
okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. They know that bird's up there. And so when you flush a covey of sage grouse, it's like they're shot out of a cannon. And so you never see sage grouse fly as fast as when there's a falcon in the air, because they just want to get the hell out of Dodge. And, it's that overwhelming thing. First, it's the dog. It's like, oh, shoot, there's a dog. And then, oh, shoot, there's a falcon in the air. And then when you move in for the flush, it's like overload. There's too much. And
yeah,
so
they're gone.
They explode out of there. But then you see that flight where your bird is over 1,000 feet up and a half a mile or a quarter of a mile out, and they come in on a stoop that just covers the whole sky from horizon to horizon. You're starting.
Oh my God.
You've got a flight that may be a mile long at high speed with a fantastic impact, and it's fun. It's just so much fun.
Aaron, I think it's time for us to. I think it's time for us to move.
Yep.
Don't move to Idaho. You can't hunt grouse here anymore.
You're getting me excited. Oh my God. That just got I was getting goosebumps, man. That's awesome.
Well, that was my life in falconry for about 20 years until things got to the point where the Fish and Game took action to limit the amount of grouse that you have. And now it's almost gotten to the point where it's not even worth it. You still do it, but it's not like it was. You can't go out and just hawk for 3 months straight. And people that are new to this area just don't get it. They don't understand the amount of changes that this place has gone through. The amount of sagebrush that's been tilled up, they've turned it into alfalfa fields. The sage grouse numbers are nothing like they were in the 80s and 90s. Like, we had just gobs of them here. And we've lost 80% of them. So
jeez.
That's why, you could come out here midwinter and find flocks of grouse and be like, I don't know what they're talking about. There's grouse everywhere. And you're like, no, dude, you don't know what grouse everywhere looks like.
Yeah. That's sad. That's sad to hear, but that seems to be the story all over the country. And I think it's only going to get worse, to be honest. So are you transitioning then to ducks?
Yeah, that's the thing, is like you fly more ducks, you fly more huns, you fly more sharp-tailed grouse. We've got sharp-tailed grouse here. Okay. But they're Colombian sharp-tailed grouse. They're in different habitats, so they're kind of ratty. People think that Colombian sharp-tailed grouse are ratty. I think it's more of the environment that they're in, because they're always around a lot of brush, and so
they put back in and try to.
They're harder to get up than out on the plains. But
so getting those nice flights, other than sage grouse, you probably need the ducks, huh?
Yeah, and you can get some amazing flights with ducks. You really can. Duck hawking is a lot of fun. It's a lot easier than hunting sage grouse, but it definitely isn't boring. Especially if you're pushing for that high and wide flight, because you could do the same thing. Your flight style can be exactly the same. It's just that you're flushing off of a pond where you've seen, so you don't have any of the dog work. And for me, that's like half of it is the dog work.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're in good company.
Man, that's incredible. I mean, I feel like there's more we could cover. But to end on that note, man, that story, just you describing the slip and horizon to horizon. I'm picturing like, well, you said you fly during the day, but in my mind, I'm picturing like the sun going down and the sky changing colors. That's the way. And then this thing just ripping over your head. That's what I'm picturing.
That's right. That's what I'm picturing. You hear them before you see them.
Yeah.
And
I've never experienced that. I've been out on long wing hunts, like in the marshes and with young birds, helping guys, just like experiencing it, flying my goss on the marshes. But I've never experienced like a long wing like a made bird, like just hauling ass and just smoking something. And the thump, I've never experienced that.
Well, and get this too, sage grouse and sharp-tailed grouse, prairie chickens, they are such fantastic animals that are designed to survive out there. When you've got a bird that comes in, it seems like Mach 3 and they hit it, and that bird just falters a little in the sky and just turns on the afterburners and blows out of there even harder. I mean, it's just fascinating. I'm just as much fascinated with the prey species as I am with the falcons. I have the utmost respect for them, and
that's great.
And that's why
You've
I don't like, you know, that's why their preservation to me is so important. Because if there's a chance that I am impacting them, I would much rather give up hunting them than actually pushing it to the end. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of guys would really hate me for saying that, but that's just the way I am with it.
I think it's important that we practice falconry in a way that's not detrimental to wild populations.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and maybe, and it may very well be that falconry, the way that we practice it, has absolutely no impact on it. Right. But the thing is I'm not going to be I don't want to sit there sawing into a grouse breast, eating it while their numbers are dwindling like this, because I know that me killing that grouse didn't help. You know, it didn't help the situation. But as long as it's legal, and as long as the conservationists say, you know, it can handle being hunted, I'm going to do it.
Yeah,
you know, but if the time ever comes where they are put on the endangered species list in Idaho, I'm probably not going to complain too much about it.
Yeah. I mean, there's like you said, a bunch of people, and even like playing devil's advocate, like you would say that, like, you know, wild birds of prey are killing them, you know, all the time, and catching one a day, you know, if that, with a long wing is not really going to have an impact. But I do see your point out of just respect for the quarry and giving them the best chance they can.
They're not doing it with the help of a Llewellyn setter and a human, though.
Yeah, it's true.
That's true. And an eagle's killing a lot more in a season than I am. And but here's the other thing, though, is that because I'm a human, every bird that gets killed by a fence or a car or the access of eagles from a telephone pole, those birds were killed by people.
That's true. That's a great point.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's the way I look at it.
I like your holistic view on it. Yeah, it's great. All right. Jake, where can people find you? And is there anything else you want to cover?
They can't. They cannot find me. I'm in the woods, disappeared under a rock somewhere. No,
I can find you on the latest season of Alone.
Yeah, you can find me. I have a Facebook page. You can find me there if you want to be my friend on there. Go for it. I also have Instagram. I'm working on a YouTube channel right now. Haven't launched it yet, but that will happen. And when that goes up, I'll have that all over my Facebook page. But yeah, please reach out if you want. Reach out.
Perfect. Awesome.
All right. This was great having you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Seriously, this was a pleasure. And dude, you're great on the mic, man. You should definitely, if you're thinking about starting a podcast, start it. You're phenomenal.
And giving some thought to it.
Yeah, you had a lot of time on Alone to think and talk and
and man. little else.
Little else, and that's fine. Yeah, no, you honed your craft. You're excellent. You were an excellent guest, and we just really appreciate your time, man. Thank you.
Thank you.